you okay? You know it's supposed to be a giant flood with freezing water, right? Like today. Can you walk out your knees and ankles are gonna freeze over? You're gonna get frostbite. Huh? Okay, hey, you know what? If your feet fall off, don't say I said it in the morning. Just saying.
Good morning, Colin. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Good. I don't know who is iPhone in the waiting room. Guessing it's someone who is on their iPhone. They left. We'll never know. Good morning, Giselle. How are you? I'm pretty good. I got a little cold earlier today. I was doing car line, and like as soon as car line started, um, just like the rain and the thunder hit. I feel bad for everybody who walked to school because a lot of them just got soaked. We were talking about how we probably would have just like turned around and gone back, like gone home. Good morning. I'm gonna go ahead and post the note pod. So if you guys are near pod, sorry. So if you guys want to go into that, you can. I'll put the do now, your journal entry up, so you can go ahead and do that if you want to. You can get started before everybody else. I'm gonna admit iPhone. Hopefully this isn't a mistake. We'll find out who they are.
It's me. It's Emma.
Okay. Hi, Emma.
Sorry, I'm using my phone at the moment
Okay.
because my computers hate me.
Okay. That's fine.
Sorry, I
No,
just didn't know how to rename myself on my phone,
that's
and I
not a
kept
big deal.
trying to.
I was like, I'm going to let them in and hopefully it's not just like a crazy person.
I promise you, I'm not crazy. I'm a little crazy. Like, I'm not gonna lie. We're just that's every day. Uh,
I think
but
I can rename you. So there you go.
thank you.
You're welcome. I was like, I'm going to go
No. You need to rename my name to be the best. I'm just kidding. I'm not.
I was like, I'm going to go ahead and let them in and pray that it isn't a mistake. I will be right back. I'm going to close the door to the classroom. All right, there we go. I actually turned the heat on in the room, so we might not freeze to death after all. And Madeline. All right.
So, how was your day been?
It was very cold and rainy during Carline.
Yeah.
And then this is my first class of the day. So
That's nice.
I just worked on a bunch of stuff. I did the extra credit I'm going to give you guys for the day that I'm gone in November. And then that's basically it.
That's nice.
Yeah.
I'm at my dad's house,
Oh.
but my dad's at work, so I'm just with my grandparents and stepmom. So, yeah.
Posting the Nearpod for those of you who need it.
We're just gonna continue through the website. I've had to improvise all day because I've been like losing. Oh Lord, I'm sorry.
Okay. All right, Vincent, Julian, and Laura. Vincent, Julian, Laura's here. We'll wait just a couple more minutes for those of you who are just joining us. Let me get Luis in and Barbara. Here is, again, a link to the Nearpod, so you can go ahead and begin your journal entries. There is, of course, a link in to a PowerPoint version of this in Schoology. So if you don't get a chance to finish your entry, you will be able to go back to it. Oh, really? It's not. How about now? Is it working now? It's not loading? Okay, let me see. I might have to just share mine.
I can see it on my end, so let's.
Some people are
Yeah.
getting a white screen, some people can see it. So that's cool. That's fun. Why not? Try if you're getting a white screen, try reloading the whole thing, like close out of your browser and open it back up. And I'll put the link in again. And if that doesn't fix it, then I will have to share it. The only problem is that then we can't do the collaborate boards, but it is what it is. Any better? It's still a white screen for you? Okay. All right, so let me go ahead and, all right. Those of you who can't get in, there you go. If you can't, just give me 2 seconds and I see 8 people have gotten in, so that's bizarre. But let me share it here. And then we'll have to do, we will have to do the collaborative stuff in the chat instead of doing it in Nearpod. The Nearpods are really helpful on days like today where I don't have a second monitor. It's like most of the time when I'm teaching this class, I'm at this desk where I don't have access to a second monitor. Whereas the other room that I mostly teach from, I do have one. Okay, let's see. Luis just came in, and so did Brian. Give me 2 seconds and I will get the PowerPoint itself up so that you can see it better. There we go. Sort of. Boy, I love technology. All right. There we go. So now hopefully you guys can see what I see. So we'll do the journal entries will be your homework. There's not going to be an exit ticket, so maybe we can do it at the end of the class because I had already not planned for an exit ticket for today. So we have some extra time maybe. All right, so today we're going to talk about Elizabethan theater. And as I mentioned previously, when we were talking about my dissertation, this was sort of the time period that I researched for my dissertation, and it's kind of like the period that I know the most about. So if you have any questions or if there's anything that I'm not like explaining fully, please let me know, or so I can slow down or explain it in a different way, because you know, sometimes when you know like a lot about something and you're trying to introduce somebody new to it, you kind of like get ahead of yourself. Okay, so this will be, we'll do this for our, basically for our journal entry for homework instead of doing it now. So just sort of, we'll sort of flip this one. Okay, so I wanted to show you this little video that will introduce you to sort of what leads up to the Elizabethan period. So let me make sure that I have my computer sound on. And here we go.
Terrible Tudors.
Divorced, beheaded and died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. I'm Henry VIII, I had 6 sorry wives. Some might say I ruined their lives. Catherine of Aragon was one. She failed to give me a son. I had to ask her for a divorce. That broke up her heart, of course. Young Anne Boleyn, she was 2. Had a daughter, the best she could do. I said she flirted with some other man, and off with the chop went dear Anne. Lovely Jane Seymour was 3, the love of a lifetime for me. She gave me a son, little Prince Ed. Then poor old Jane went and dropped dead. Divorced, beheaded and died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. I'm Henry VIII, I had 6 sorry wives. Some might say I ruined their lives. Anne of Cleves came at 4. I fell for the portrait I saw. Then laid eyes on her face and cried, she's a horse. I must have another divorce. Catherine Howard was 5. A child of 19, so alive. She flirted with others, no way to behave. The axe sent young Kath to her grave. Catherine Parr, she was lost. By then all my best days were past. I lay on my deathbed, aged just 55. Lucky Catherine the last stayed alive. I mean, how unfair. Ugh! Divorced, beheaded and died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. I'm Henry VIII, I had 6 sorry wives. You could say I ruined their lives.
Exciting news! Henry VIII is looking for a new wife.
Oh no.
What did I say?
Okay, so part of the reason why this is important for you to know is because it sets up some things that we're going to see in the theater, and it also sets up some things that are very, very important for England during this time. Okay, so England had been a Catholic country, much like the majority of Europe, right? Henry VIII wants a divorce, as he mentions. He's going to get one, right? But the problem is that if you know anything about Catholicism, right, divorce isn't really in their repertoire. They don't really, and it was even stricter back then. That wasn't really something that they did, right? So the Pope tells him, like, no, like, you can't have one. And Henry gets very upset about this. And as a result, he creates a whole new religion called the Anglican Church. And then he says that he, the King of England, is the head of the Anglican Church. And this basically allows him to give himself the right to get a divorce, right? So as you see, as he progresses through his wives, he divorces his first one. He has the second one killed. He divorces his third, or the third one dies. Then he divorces the fourth one, right? Has the fifth one killed, and then he dies before anything bad can happen to the sixth one, right? So that's sort of what happened before we get to Elizabethan England. So Elizabeth I is the daughter of Henry VIII. So she is basically the one who kind of inherits this whole mess, right? And she's going to become one of sort of the most beloved queens of the time. She's also going to be one of the first royals who is a woman who gets the crown without having to marry someone for it. And as a matter of fact, she's actually never going to get married. So, yep, he created a whole church just to get what he wanted. That's exactly right, Carla. Yep, he did. He wanted a divorce and they said no. So he said, well, then I'll just make my own religion. And I'm the head of my religion. Yes, Emma.
So, about Elizabeth.
Uh-huh.
So, Elizabeth went through a lot of crap before she was able to become the queen of England. Like, first of all, she had a brother. He died.
Yeah, Ed.
Yes. And then her sister Mary became the queen and we really wanted to kill her.
Yeah, Mary and Elizabeth. Well, Elizabeth ends up putting Mary in the tower and basically imprisons her. So
yeah. And actually when, like, before Anne Boleyn died, the second wife died, Henry gave her a chance to be like, hey, I'll let you live, but your daughter won't inherit the throne. And she was like, I'm just going to get my head chopped off. She's going to become queen eventually.
Yeah, actually, his first wife, Catherine, had a lot to do with her becoming queen. After Henry dies, Catherine's really the one who fights for Elizabeth to be able to inherit the crown. Even though, it wasn't her daughter, she sort of took on the responsibility.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Catherine,
it's pretty wild. There's a new series about it now as well, told from Catherine's perspective. So this, I said, is going to set up some things for the Elizabethan stage. Okay, so let's see. Cameron, why don't you read this slide for us? Are you there? I don't know if Cameron's mic works. I think it does, though.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Rules of Elizabethan stage. No female actors, no biblical figures allowed on stage. Public theaters were affordable. Private theaters more expensive/exclusive.
Yes, perfect. Okay, so again, we're back to not allowing women on stage, right? Which has been pretty much par for the course this entire time. Now, why do you think they made the decision not to allow any biblical figures on stage? If you had to guess, what would you think would be the reason? Rebellion? Yeah, that's part of it. Oh, Mildred, go ahead.
So didn't he make his own religion basically to basically be different from the other religion he was trying to go against?
Yeah, so he makes his own religion, right? But there's still a ton of people in England who consider themselves Catholic, who are having private, secret, underground Catholic services, right? Because he forces the whole country to switch to the Anglican Church. But there's a lot of people that they didn't really want to do that. So they're pretending to be Anglican, but they're really still Catholic, right? So Elizabeth knows that there's this tension that's going on. And the easiest way to avoid that, like Hannah says, causing a rebellion or causing even more problems is to not let it be part of the entertainment, right? Yeah, exactly. So people won't get mad. Just avoid that entirely when you can. Hey. Oh, yeah, sure. Go ahead. Oh, nice. I approve. But yeah, so that's the idea, right? So it's to prevent a problem. Now, when we talk about public and private theaters, you're going to see that there's a lot of differences between the two. And when I say that they're affordable, I really mean that everyone who lives in the city of London can at some point afford to go to these public theaters and watch a play. Okay. Let me see the poll for this one. So go ahead and answer in the chat. Do you think that this was a good idea that Elizabeth had to ban biblical figures from the theater? So go ahead in the chat. Yes or no? Is that a good idea? Lots of yeses. It certainly makes it easier, right? On her and the people who are making theater to avoid being a part of any more problems. And as you're going to see, like everything is still like the portion of people who still want to be Catholic is going to continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Hannah, I think it was really, it wasn't that, the Anglican Church still obviously like read the Bible. They were using stories from the Bible. It was more about the way that they were going to depict the people, right? And they couldn't anticipate how people were going to react to it. And so they were just trying to like eliminate religion from entertainment. And so that you got any religious stories told to you was going to come from the Anglican Church. So it was kind of like eliminating competition, right? Yeah. So it's very different, right, from the Middle Ages that we just talked about, like medieval theater to this. It's like two completely different worlds. Okay, so the first public theater. Okay. Let's see. Anybody want to volunteer to read this one? Yeah. Mildred, go ahead and read it.
First public theater, James Burbage built theater in 76, my bad.
It's okay.
The lumber for theater was used to build the Globe after Elizabeth I, right?
Yep.
After Elizabeth first banned theater from the city limits of London.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so here's what happens. We have the city of London and if you ever looked at a map of London, let me pull one up real quick. I can get one pulled up that's not gonna like completely destroy. Gosh, these are such tiny computers. So the city of London was sort of like defined by the river that runs through the city. Just show me the image, view image. Okay. So let me pop over to this real quick. Okay. So you can see here in this picture that you have the city and then you have the river, right? And then there's not so much on the other side, okay? So the first theater that James Burbage he builds is called Theater. That's the name of it. Not very original, but that's what we're dealing with here, okay? And so he builds theater like at the very sort of edge of the town. And unfortunately, what happens is that area of town that he picked becomes sort of run down. It becomes very well known for things like prostitution and hostels and like not a very good place to be. What kind was it? The public theaters? I'll show you a picture of it. So yeah, it becomes like a bad area of town. And there's a lot of people who start blaming the theater for the reason why that area got bad, right? So Elizabeth is pressured to put on, yeah, exactly. It wasn't, it was like the wrong side of London at the time. So Elizabeth is pressured to like push to ban theater from the city limits. And she does. So what they do is they just take all the lumber from the theater and they put it on a barge and they take it just across the river and they rebuild it on the other side and then it's called the Globe, right? So they just take it across the river, rebuild it, And it's the Globe now. And it's perfectly legal because it's not in the city of London anymore, right? It's outside the city limits. And it's still very easy to get to. So everybody wins, basically. So then basically, I just want you to remember from this that we have theater. We take the lumber for theater, we move it across the river, we make it into the Globe, which is probably if you know anything about Shakespeare, that's probably the theater that you've heard of before, right? Yeah, okay. All right, so let's talk about the Globe specifically. Emma, why don't you read us this slide?
Yay. Oh, wait. I have people talking. Held over 3,000 people. Administration was 1 penny. Really? Yep. Frequency closed during the plagues. Thatched roof caused it to burn down in 1613.
Yes, exactly. So it holds a lot of people. It's an open air theater so that there's no roof to it, really. Well, there's like a partial roof. I'll show you a picture. But it was very cheap, 1 penny. So that's what I mean that it was affordable. That basically, if you sold flowers, if you swept out like the gutters, if you like any job that you had, you could afford to go see a play at the Globe at some point in time. No, it wasn't, Mildred. It was very, very affordable. And this is part of the reason that we know that the people who went to see Shakespeare, that Shakespeare was writing for pretty much everybody in the city of London. People who were uneducated, people who didn't really, like I said, who could barely afford 1 penny, but they're still like spending it on seeing theater. That would be worth quite a bit, right? I'm trying to find it. Yeah, here's a good picture of the Globe. Okay, so this is what it looks like. This is the Globe now, but this is an approximation of what it looked like at the time. So that 1 penny gets you these things here. They're called groundlings, and I'm going to put that in the chat because you would stand to watch the show. So you pay a penny, you come in, and you're standing here to watch the show. If you paid a little bit more, yeah, it does. It sounds like some sort of medieval or fantasy, like something. You paid a little bit more, you'd have this area here where you could sit on a bench to watch, right? Paid a little bit more, you're up here, you're sort of away, middle class, right? You're away from the sort of cheap seats, right? You're probably a merchant, maybe. And then at the very top is where people who had the upper class sat, right? So this is where you would have lords and ladies and royalty actually come to the Globe to see the theater. So yeah, as you can see, a lot of it is open to the sky, right? Exactly. But we do have some thatched roofing, right? We have the house and the stage, right? I wish I knew what play this was for. And a couple of pillars, but not a whole lot on the stage. There's not going to be a lot of scenery during this time because Shakespeare's plays, if you've ever read one, go to a lot of different locations very quickly. And they didn't really have a way to get stuff on and off the stage, right? So you're not going to see a lot of big scenery pieces. And if you do, it's going to be something that is going to be really important for some scenes, and you're going to just have to like deal with it being on stage where the scene for other scenes where it's not supposed to be there. Okay. I think you guys are getting the idea. Okay, so yeah, minimal scenery, not really a lot. They would do things like bring out like one small tree, like a, you know, like a sapling, right? And put it in the middle of the stage. And then they would say, you know, that we're in a forest, and that little tree reminds you that we're in a forest, and then you fill in the rest with your imagination, okay? But they did use backdrops. They would have, you know, tapestries that would sort of set the scene when they could do that. And they use lots of special effects. All of those like fun special effects that we talked about from the medieval theater, a lot of those sort of transfer over. So the smoke, these things called thunder runs, which are kind of like gutters at bowling alleys. You'd take like a cannonball and roll it down it, and it would sort of make thunder sounds. They're using trapdoors. You don't really get the flying systems anymore, but a lot of the other stuff that we talked about from the medieval theater, they're still using. Okay, so we have two types of theater, okay? Let's see. Carla, can you read this for us?
Yeah, okay. Types of theaters. Public, open in summer, able to sit thousands, the globe, affordable. Versus private, open in the winter, could sit only a few hundred.
Blackfriars, yep.
Yeah, Blackfriars, my bad. Expensive and exclusive.
Okay, good. So you can see the differences here, right? Pretty clear. Summer versus winter, lots of people. The indoor theaters obviously are smaller. Now, what does Blackfriars make you think of? Besides like a chicken place, because for some reason it always makes me think of a chicken place.
Friars I know are like people who worked in the church, I think.
Yeah, that's a black air fryer. Yeah, so what happened when they got rid of the Catholic Church was that you had these places, these churches, right, that were sort of now, they didn't have any purpose, right? So they started using those churches or these places where like nuns or friars or monks had lived, and they made them into indoor theaters. So Blackfriars is one of those. One of the most popular ones was actually a children's theater. So like little kid actors. And then obviously they're more expensive, right? Because they're smaller, they don't fit as many people. So, question for you. Why do you think private theaters were necessary in London? And since we can't use our collaborate thing, go ahead and answer in the chat. Just why do you think they needed it? The Queen could go to one, okay? For the high status people, yeah, you guys aren't wrong. What else? Hiding for religion? A little bit, yeah. Think about the time of year we just talked about. I'm gonna go back a slide so you can, maybe I will, there we go. And I say that publicly instead of just privately. People could see without anyone knowing. Yeah, some of it was for secrecy. Fancier, yeah, it definitely meant that they didn't have to like mix with like the regular people, right? The top line here. Yes, okay. London gets really bad winters, right? So you couldn't really use the public theaters at all. So if you wanted to keep doing theater, you had to find a place to do it indoors, right? Yeah, they weren't, nobody was doing great. It's true. Most of these places, like, so the Globe and Blackfriars, both were the theaters that served the same company that Shakespeare wrote for. Okay. So the quality, the shows were the same, but it meant that the upper class could continue to go see entertainment the whole year round. And then in the winter, they could go see, sometimes that would be where they would show brand new plays, right? Well, Carla, they didn't really have any other like entertainment options, you know? The printing press hasn't been really developed yet. It's going to very soon. It will during this period, but they couldn't read books. They maybe had a Bible in their home, right? And it was also like a social event. So you would pay to go to the theater, you'd see your friends, right? And you could do that in the winter time when it sucked outside, and it gave you a reason to, like, yeah, exactly. Give you a reason to get out of your house, you know? So, and they also would maybe like debut shows there. So like the very first time they do a new play, right? So you'd be like one of the first people to see it. So that would be fun. Yeah, you guys have got it though. There's lots of different reasons, right? But it was primarily based on the fact that the weather was not great and that the upper class would get bored. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Shakespeare. How many of you have read one of Shakespeare's plays previously? And what play is it? Actually, I should just say, how many people have read Romeo and Juliet? Because that's usually the one, right? Oh, you haven't read it. Okay. Okay. You got bored. It's better to watch it than to read it, right? Shakespeare did not write his plays to be read. He wrote them to be watched. You saw one of the movies? Okay. There's a very good version of it on Amazon Prime. And actually, I haven't watched it yet, but there's a version now, a free version on YouTube done by the Globe. Oh, you saw Romeo and Juliet? I actually almost put something about that in my dissertation. Have you guys ever seen, what's the name of it? It's a movie that I went to go see, and then I realized very quickly that it's a zombie version of Romeo and Juliet.
Why does that kind of sound like Pride and Prejudice and Zombies?
It's Warm Bodies. Warm Bodies is Romeo and Juliet, but the Romeo is a zombie. And it definitely has a different ending, right? But yeah, so if you liked it, I would suggest that you try to watch the plays instead of reading them, because they're a lot better when you're seeing them the way that Shakespeare meant them to be done, right? But yeah, so Shakespeare, born in not London, right? Born in Stratford upon Avon. We know that he was educated because we know that he had some Latin, meaning that he was able to read and write in Latin, which you were only really able to do if you were educated in the church. But his family sort of came into some problems financially, and he left to apprentice as a butcher. He meets a woman named Anne Hathaway, And it was a very scandalous thing. He marries her. She's older than he is by like 8 years. She's lower class than he is. She's like a farmer's daughter. So why do you think they got married? Money? Nope. Well, they might have loved each other at the beginning. They may have at the beginning. They were forced in a way. Pretty sure that, no, it wasn't arranged. Pretty sure that she was pregnant. And so they were forced to get married because she was pregnant. Yeah. Yep. Because when Shakespeare goes to London, he does not stay faithful to Anne Hathaway. If you ever read any of his sonnets are dedicated to two people. One is a young man, and the second person he dedicates his sonnets to is a dark lady. So we're pretty sure that he had two people in London that he was in relationships with, a young man and a Black woman. So it's pretty, yeah. We also know that they didn't really like each other because in his will, he leaves her, quote, his second best bed. And it was tradition at the time to leave your wife your marriage bed instead. Yeah, so he was a little bit scandalous, right? But he gets to London and he sort of gets lucky. He meets the right people at the right time. He hooks up with a couple of people who were like the up and coming actors, tragedians and clowns are what they're called. So if you act primarily in tragedies, you're a tragedian, and if you act primarily in comedies, you're a clown, right? So he gets to London, and he very quickly achieves success, right? He writes a lot of plays that are a new genre. So what are the two genres we've primarily been talking about?
The comedy and the tragedy.
Yes. Okay. So good. Now we're adding history plays. Okay. Yep. Good, Hannah. Exactly. History plays are going to be plays that he writes to specifically talk about the history of England, but also to promote the family of the queen, right? He wants her family to, the Tudors, to seem really like outstanding people, okay? So when you read them, I mean, some of them are excellent. A lot of them are very good, but they are definitely told through like the lens of trying to make them seem great, right? He writes in a poetic meter called iambic pentameter, which you may have heard of before. Now, when Elizabeth dies, which we're going to talk about a little bit more, he's going to really become a businessman and a playwright. Macbeth is a play, and I'll explain why it's super important in just a second. But so Elizabeth dies, and she doesn't have an heir. She's never gotten married. She doesn't have any children. She's in love with a man who she can't get married to, so she stays truthful to him. She doesn't get married. James I becomes king. James is Scottish, and he's a cousin to Elizabeth. So everybody's a little bit nervous that he's taking the throne, right? He also becomes king when the plague is like really, really terrible in London. So James decides that he's not going to come to London right away. And he instead waits sort of in like one of the country palaces. So Shakespeare is like, okay, hey, the plague is bad. We're going to leave London. We're going to go to that palace where James is, and we're going to do a play specifically for him called Macbeth. It's a very unusual play for Shakespeare because it's his only play that's set in Scotland, right, where James is from. And it also deals with the occult and witches and all this like spell stuff. And James was super into the occult and the idea of magic and witches. So he writes it specifically for him. And of course, this succeeds. James is super impressed. And he officially makes Shakespeare's company the King's Men. So he says, like, they work for me. They are going to, entertain my court now. And it's also smart for James because he's basically taking the Elizabeth's popular entertainment and he's just incorporating it into his own court. So Macbeth, if you're interested in like the idea of fate and like magic and all of this stuff, there's some really incredible versions of Macbeth. A couple of years ago, I showed the one that Patrick Stewart is in. It's very odd. It's very gory. There's one with Ian McKellen. A lot of famous actors have done Macbeth. So, exactly. So now I'm going to show you something that you might be surprised by, because we have here a bunch of people who are some scholars who are attempting to figure out what did English sound like when Shakespeare was alive. And this is called OP. And I don't remember if they give you the definition, so I want to now. It's called original pronunciation. Okay. So we're going to watch this little video where they're going to show you the difference between what English sounds like now and what English sounded like then.
The Globe Theatre, which opened in 1994, very near to its former site, specialises in original productions of Shakespeare. But it wasn't until 2004 that a play was performed in the original pronunciation, known as OP.
Well, the Globe is known for its original practices. This is why it is here, to try and recreate the theatre as it was in 1600 and thereabouts. And when they started it off, they decided to do original costume, original music with original instruments, original movement around the stage and so on. But they never did original pronunciation because they thought, quite wrongly, but understandably, they thought nobody would understand it. But it was a very, very successful occasion. The seats were packed for that weekend. Everybody loved it. And it was such a success that the Globe then decided to do a second production the following year, production of Troilus and Cressida.
It transports you back through the centuries. It's a very magical, almost hair-raising experience, especially in this space, to hear that accent, a space that's sort of as close as we can get to a 400-year-old theatre, and then an accent that's as close as we can get to a 400-year-old accent with a 400-year-old play. If anything, it rounds the experience of going to see a Shakespeare play out.
David and Ben have also discovered that nearly 2/3 of Shakespeare's sonnets have rhymes that don't work in modern English, but do work in OP.
Give us a good one. What, 116?
I think, 116 is interesting because lots of people have it at their weddings and they think of it as being a very sort of, highfalutin sonnet. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments, but it completely changes in OP, particularly because of the rhymes. Love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and wakes, but bears it out e'en to the edge of dumb. If this be error and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever loved.
Yeah. Proved and loved. I mean, it's a lovely ending, isn't it? Proved and loved, it simply doesn't work.
Completely falters it. If this be error and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever loved. There's something about working our way back to Shakespeare rather than dragging him into the 21st century. If you can sort of imagine that there's that extra dimension when you're working in a space like this, you get a similar sort of extra dimension when you use Shakespeare's accent.
So yeah, so what you see here, right, is the idea that a lot of these things, it's obvious that they don't work, right? Actually, you know what? We've got a little bit of time. There's one, if you're interested in this, there's one where they actually go back and forth and like do a sonnet. And you can hear like the difference. Let's see, is it this one? Can't tell no, that's British Council seminars, which is also probably interesting. There's a whole bunch of their stuff. But yeah, it's interesting because it's a father who studies linguistics, and then you have his son who became an actor, a Shakespearean actor. This might be it. Loading ad. That's always a good sign. Oh, I can make it. I'm gonna make it stop yelling at me. They have Halloween stuff at Walmart, y'all. We just learned that. Okay. Come on. So just the blah 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 blah. No, I think it should play it. But not play it in England. Okay, yeah, I think it is. But they go back and forth in one of their videos, and you can actually like listen to how, like, what a difference it makes when you do it in the original pronunciation. So they have whole shows now in the OP, and I wouldn't suggest, if like you have not watched Shakespeare before, to immediately jump to the OP because you'll be very confused. But for people who are sort of familiar with some of these plays, like let's say you were super familiar with Romeo and Juliet, then when you watch it in the OP, there's stuff that you might like pick up for the very first time. So what do you think about this idea? Like how different English sounds now versus 400 years ago when Shakespeare was writing? "400 years ago, it sounded jumbled." Yeah, for us now, for sure. Yeah. The slang, yeah, the slang that Shakespeare created, like Shakespeare created tons of words. Shakespeare created tons and tons and tons of words. There's here's 422 words that Shakespeare invented.
This is just what I'm thinking that he did when he was making words. He's like, man, possum and bear. Ah, yes, that means lazy big man.
Yeah. Yeah, he's just bear. We invent words all the time, right? We invent words every day. It's just that most of them don't actually become part of the English language, right? Where everybody now knows them. And if you look at some of the words that Shakespeare invented, it's like stuff that you use all the time. And you would never sort of consider the fact that somebody at some point, right, had to make that into a word that was used every day. he also would do things where he would like take two words and just like smash them together, right? So like a lot of conjugated, or a lot of, what's the word? Like twasn't, wasn't, all of that stuff, like taking was not, conjoined. Thank you, Tyler. Yeah. Elderflower, microaggression, which I do enjoy. So at the bottom of this, it has a list of all of the words that Shakespeare invented. Accessible, addiction, baseless, anchovy. Yeah. Bedroom, bloodstained, bump, candle holder. Pretty wild, huh?
He made those words and we use them every day. What the heck?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All of this stuff like premiered for the first time during Shakespeare's plays. So it's pretty interesting. I mean, some of them like hedge pig, I don't think I've ever used hedge pig, right? But indistinguishable, invulnerable. So the contribution is there. And that's sort of the thing that when people want to talk about like taking, reducing the effect of Shakespeare in the theatrical canon, I agree. However, his contribution to the actual English language is pretty significant. So this is sort of to guide you to where we're going to go next, because the next thing we're going to talk about is going to be neoclassicism in France. So how do we get there? Well, James I, right, who became king, he is succeeded by Charles I. And remember how I said that there was a lot of tension between the Anglican people and the Catholic people? Well, that's going to come to a head during Charles I. And the Catholics, who are led by Oliver Cromwell, also called the Roundheads, are going to defeat Charles I, and they're going to behead him. So once he is killed, essentially his son and basically everybody who could afford to get out of there go to France. They call up Louis XIV, who's the king of France, and they're like, bad stuff's happening. Can we come over? And Louis XIV is like, let's have the world's best sleepover for 18 years. So Charles II and all of them go to France. They're going to be there for 18 years while Charles II, A, grows up, and B, amasses an army to come back and take over, like to defeat Oliver Cromwell. And while they're in France, they're obviously going to go to the French theater. And so today is Friday. So on Tuesday, we're going to go over a period called the Royal Era, which is also then leads to the Restoration. And the Restoration refers to when Charles II is restored to the British throne. So we'll talk about that on Tuesday. The only homework I have for you for the weekend is to do that journal entry. So let me go back to it. And you have 4 minutes now. If you want to go ahead and do it, you can. But that's all I have for you. Any questions, any concerns?
I have a question about the exit.
Sure. And we don't have an exit ticket. This is just a journal entry.
Oh, I don't quite understand how to submit it.
The journals?
Oh, the journal entry? Never mind.
Yeah, it's just a journal entry. You don't have to do an exit ticket today.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I did do an exit ticket. I figured I didn't know how much time we were going to have. So that's it for me. So if you have your journal entry done, you can go ahead and log out. Otherwise, if you have any questions, go ahead and ask them. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next Tuesday, and we'll talk about the Theater of France.
When is it due? Today? Right? The journal entry, so I can take.
No, just do the journal entry today, but it's not going to be due. We're not going to have our first journals due until November 13th. So as long as you're keeping up with them, you're good. You have a good weekend too. Bye. Yeah, everybody have a good weekend. Try to find some time to rest. Bye.
Well, guess what?
Yes.
So I took a DNA test, the 23andMe. My results just came in.
Oh, cool.
They came in early.
Oh, that's nice.
So I'm finding about this.
That's very cool. I did some, I did mine a while ago, and it basically was just like, you're super white. And I was like, I didn't need to pay for that. Thank you.
Yeah. I thought, yeah, that's what it's saying too.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
all right.
It's saying I am British Irish.
That's exactly what I got.
Hey, we could be related.
Probably.
Okay, so I'm 84% in Northern European, 71% British Irish. I am 8% German / France. Yeah, like I have nothing from anywhere else.
Yeah, I didn't really either. I had a little bit of Eastern Europe from my Prussian ancestors, but that was.
I have a little bit of North Africa.
Interesting.
But that's different.
All right. Well, you have a great weekend, my dear. You enjoy.
Well, let's find out if I have cousins.
Yeah. You're gonna have your weekend at your dad's. Is that what you're doing?
Yeah.
All right. Well, have a good weekend, and I will talk to you on Tuesday.
Talk to you on Tuesday. Bye. Wait. Could you email the substitute for geography saying, hey, I'm on my phone, not a computer? So
yes. Yep, no problem. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.